Welcome back guys to the 7th round of the US Chess Championship. In today's video we are following the game of the current leader Hikaru Nakamura. In this game he had the black pieces against the experienced Varuzhan Akobian. So without further ado, let's jump into this game. Akobian played d4, Nakamura played the move d6, not the standard approach to 1d4, allowing Akobian to grab the center with e4 and transpose to the perk. Akobian decides not to grab it, he plays knight f3. Hikaru plays g6, preparing to challenge the center from the wings. Akobian plays c4, bishop g7, knight c3, knight c6, d5. Akobian decides to gain more space, we have knight e5, knight captures, bishop captures, e4, knight f6. So this position does resemble a King's Indian defense, but it's a little strange since the bishop is on e5 instead of g7. So Akobian continued his development, both sides castled, and Nakamura played e6, simply challenging White's strong center. Now with hindsight, Akobian probably should have considered bishop g5. This move has not been played before, but it seems like a decent try. White is pinning the knight on f6 and halting some of Black's immediate plans to occupy the king side with knight h5 and queen to h4. But Akobian played h3 in the game. It takes away the g4 square, which could be useful if White plans to go bishop e3 at some point. But h3 does soften up the king side a bit. Hikaru played e takes d5, c takes d5, capturing towards the center, and this is actually the new move in the position. Previously, e takes d5 has been played in a blitz game, so this is a very practical decision where White wouldn't have to worry about Black piling up on the e4 pawn. But here Akobian played c takes d5. Nakamura now plays knight to h5, so immediately making way for the queen. With Black having this strong bishop on e5, White kind of wants to play the move f4. This also gains more space, but it does weaken the g3 square as White has already pushed h3. White should probably prepare this advance with knight e2 to deny the bishop the d4 square, also covering g3, before pushing f4, but Akobian plays f4 immediately, allowing bishop d4 check, king h2, and now queen to h4 from Nakamura, with threats of playing queen g3, and after king h1, ideas like bishop takes h3. So we now reach a crucial stage of the game, where Akobian has to decide how to defend this g3 square. And this is a very tough decision because it's not clear which option is better. The three options that come to mind are queen to f3, knight to e2, also queen to e1. So let's take a look at queen to f3. So if queen to f3, Black can play g5. This reminds me of the Sicilian defense where Black sacrifices the g5 pawn to gain control of the e5 square for a knight, but in this case it's a bishop. So king g1, avoiding the fork with knight g3. Black goes knight g3 anyway, attacking the rook, and after queen f2, pinning the knight, f6. This looks easier to play for Black, although the computer thinks this position is equal. Black has threats such as bishop takes h3, followed by capturing on g5, and the bishop on e5 is just a monster, looking at both sides of the board. So queen f3 is a possibility to consider. Another move is knight to e2, but after bishop f2, this makes things pretty awkward for White, because this knight has to stay guarding the g3 square, which in turn limits the queen's mobility on the king side. Black also keeps the pressure by preventing the queen trade with queen to e1. The benefit of this move is that it opens up the c file, giving white some sort of play against this weakness on c7, but this position is very unclear. Akobian goes for the third option, which is the move queen to e1. Hikaru accepts the trade, believing that he would have some pressure in the resulting position. So here rook f1 is forced to meet bishop to g3 check, which also attacks the f4 pawn, and after king g1, f5. This was Hikaru's idea to eventually target the f4 pawn. Akobian played the move rook to f3, so hoping for pawn takes e4, and after knight takes e4, this would kick away the bishop. White can go g3, and he's doing fine in this position. So instead of bishop to h4, if bishop takes f4, white has to move g4. If the knight moves, then white can capture the bishop. If bishop h2 check, white has to go king g3 to defend the rook on f3. After rook captures, king captures, knight g7, knight f6 check, king h8, protecting the pawn on h7. After bishop f4, bishop takes, white eliminates the only active piece. Black's bishop on c8 has no squares to go to, meaning that the rook on a8 is useless, and white gets way too much activity. So instead of bishop h2 check, if black plays bishop takes c1, then rook takes f8, and after rook takes c1, knight g7, rook takes c7 with a superior position for white due to his active pieces. So Hikaru instead goes bishop takes f4, and after bishop takes f4, pawn takes e4 wins back the piece because of the rook's discovery on the bishop. Akobian played bishop takes pawn. We have knight takes bishop. This was another crucial stage of the game. White should have probably played knight b5. Going after this weakness on c7, rook f7 is the most tricky continuation. So if knight takes, then here black can play knight takes h3, followed by taking on c7. So here white should go king to h2, stepping out of this check on h3. And after bishop d7, knight takes c7, rook c8, rook f to a1, and white is doing fine. Instead, Akobian goes rook a to f1, attacking the pinned knight. So Hikaru goes g5, protecting the knight. And here Akobian makes an inaccuracy in the move h4, allowing Nakamura bishop g4. So rook e3, black can simply capture the pawn, as this knight is no longer attacked twice, so Akobian goes rook g3, attacking the bishop. Hikaru plays h5, defending. We have h takes g5, rook a to e8. So the result of the last 4 or 5 moves was that black managed to disconnect the white rooks. Well, you can see that his rooks are connected and nicely centralized. White also has these weak pawns. Akobian played bishop to f3. Hikaru played rook to e5, attacking the weak pawns. So Akobian has nothing better than bishop takes g4. The position was further simplified, and here black stands better because he has no weaknesses. As you can see, all of the pawns are intact. White, on the other hand, has 2 pawn islands on the queen side and on the king side, and the pawns on the king side are double and isolated. So this is very difficult to hold for Akobian. King to e2. Nakamura simply brings the king closer to the g5 pawn. We have king g7, rook c4, c6, rook to e4, king g6, rook e7, and now rook b5, defending b7, also attacking b2. Akobian plays b3. We have king takes g5. Black is now up a pawn. Rook d7, simply d5 from Hikaru. King d3, and now king to f6. The king comes over to support the queenside pawns. Hikaru knows that going after the g-pawn with the king is futile, as white has the move rook g7. So the game continued king to c3. Hikaru played a5, allowing rook b4 in case white goes a4. We have rook c7, king to e6. So what happens if Akobian tries to push the g-pawn? Nakamura will eventually get behind the pawn with rook b4. After g5, king d6. The rook moves, now b5, and the rook is free to come behind the pawn. So Akobian played a3, stopping rook b4, but Hikaru cleverly uses the passed d-pawn as a distraction. So that has to be taken. Now rook takes b3. Akobian tried to push the g-pawn. Nakamura simply played the move a4, securing the rook. And this is a pretty straightforward win for Hikaru. After securing the queenside pawns with king d6 followed by b5, black is going to win the pawn on a3, and this rook is going to swing over behind the g-pawn. So we have g5, king d6, rook f7, b5, freeing up the rook on b3. We have g6, rook takes a3, g7, and now rook g3 just in time. So in this position, Akobian resigned. So with this win, Hikaru maintains his lead. Sevian, Dominguez, and Caruana also won their games and only trail Hikaru by half a point. So that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.